Well, Shabbat Shalom and welcome. This is Torah Study for Shabbos morning. I'm Rabbi Ed Feinstein here in rainy Southern California, joined this week by my teacher and friend and inspiration, the great Rabbi Noah Kushner of Northern California. Noah, thank you for joining us. It's wonderful to be together.
As always, it's such an honor to be able to learn with you, my
Thank you.
teacher.
Just wonderful. Well, this week we are in the third of the four chapters of the Passover story. We began with the enslavement of the Israelites and Pharaoh's attempted genocide, and then the enlistment of Moses, who now confronts Pharaoh. And last week we got most of the plagues, except for the last three or so. And this week, Moses is commanded to go, Bo el Pharaoh, come unto Pharaoh, and tell him this is it. The big plagues are coming. The heavy duty plagues are coming. And of course, Pharaoh is getting incredibly obstinate. This is when even his own officers tell him, "We're all dead men. Let these people go. We don't need them." And Pharaoh has doubled down again and again and again on holding his line. He has to protect his own image, protect his own prerogative, protect his own authority, protect his own persona as king who doesn't back down. He's a god who doesn't back down to anything, except now you begin to see cracks in the persona. And then, in the middle of this parsha, the strangest thing happens. The strangest thing, because the narrative flow stops, and we are told, oh, and by the way, when you leave, this is going to be the beginning of your calendar. And when your kid comes to you and says, "What happened in Egypt?" This is what you're going to tell him. Like it doubles, the self-consciousness of the story doubles back on itself. It's like those moments in a play or in a movie when the actor breaks the fourth wall, turns to us, the audience, and speaks directly to us. Right? It's that weird sort of self-consciousness of a story revealing that I know I'm a story. And then comes the last of the plagues, the horrifying plagues of locust and hail and darkness, and then of course the one, the death of the firstborn. And here we're told, go get a lamb and kill it on the first, bring it into your house on the first of the month, and then right before the plague comes on the 14th, you're to kill it and put the blood over your lintel, which you got to imagine is the equivalent, at least in our moment of history right now, is like those people in Iran stepping out into the street. Today, someone mentioned the number of something like 16,000 people have been shot down in the street. But what does it take for a person to say, this tyranny has to end, and I'm willing to stand up against it? And that's what it meant to put the blood on the lintel. It was a complete rebellious act coming out of the, as it were, closet. Um, and hoping that this actually pans out. Just remarkable moments in this Torah portion. So before we get to the actual denouement of the story, which is coming at the end, how do you read all this? What does this touch? How does this touch you?
There's so much. Do we how many hours do we have? Is it like
Take us,
Seder at your house? Do we have
take,
7 hours?
take as much as you want. I got plenty of wine and plenty of matzah.
I'm glad you brought up the moment of putting the blood on the doorposts. And as you say, outing, because I think it's Rashi. I definitely learned this via Aviva Zornberg, my teacher, our teacher. Rashi's quoting a source saying that really until we did that public act, that was really the first mitzvah we did as a people, was to say, I'm out of here. It's public. I can't go back. And until then, Rashi says God was on the fence about us.
Hmm.
That is to say, God was like, yeah, sure, I'll save you, sure. But it was a lot of talk, and we hadn't done anything yet. And the first time we fulfill that commandment of saying, no, I'm actually leaving. I am doing something. I am leaving. This is demonstrable. This is material. This is an action. That's when God said, okay, now you're my people,
Hmm.
which I love.
And the courage to do that. Because if it,
We understand that courage, I think, in our world a lot more. You
because if
know,
it didn't happen,
Mhm.
You'd wake up in the morning and Pharaoh's police knew just who to go get, right? And I'm watching these stories from Iran. I remember friends who were in Russia, in the Soviet Union before it fell, who came out, the refuseniks, who came out and declared their intention to leave and make Aliyah to Israel. And then what happened to them when the Soviet government, could identify them, right? Or the first march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, when Martin Luther King and the African American community. The second march was the one where Heschel was on, when all the clergymen came down. But the first march was met with dogs and hoses and brutality. What does it take? What does it take to step across that bridge and say, this is not justice, this is not democracy, it's time to change? What does it take to put the blood on your lintel?
Right, right. Or even, you have people going to Minnesota or helping neighbors who are avoiding ICE, school children being taken out of schools. Um, where does that begin to come from?
Hmm.
And maybe part of it comes from knowing this, I would hope, knowing this story.
And you've been a slave, and your parents were slaves, and your grandparents were slaves. So you are used to taking orders, and you are used to keeping your head down and not making yourself visible. Because a slave knows that if he becomes visible, he's going to get the life beat out of him.
That's right.
So,
And this is all we know. This is all we know, right? Which is why it is so interesting that in the middle of this narrative, the high point of this narrative, it's not a commercial break. It's something really different where the camera stops and God stops and the action stops and God says, someday your kid is going to ask you, why did you do it?
mhm.
And so in that moment, what God is doing and what Moshe is doing is helping us see beyond our current reality. Right? We could even see this is like one of the definitions of Yirah, of having awe of heaven, is that just the fact that this will end, and when it ends, what are you going to be able to say about who you were in that moment?
Mm.
It's really hard. We know it's really, really hard. I think in other more peaceful times, it felt kind of simple to be like, well, of course, I would be one of the ones who would stand up. In times like ours, we see how hard it is.
Mhm. Right. And of course, you also have the beginning of a calendar, right?
I've been thinking so much about Jewish time and sacred time. And God says in the middle of all of this, actually, the year doesn't start there. The year starts now. Time doesn't start when you thought it was. In fact, there's some rabbis that say, I think it's Bachya, that creation actually starts now. The world starts now. Everything starts now. And by the way, Moshe, the calendar now starts with the moon, and you can't see the moon in the sky. The sky is completely dark, but the calendar starts with that moon you can't even see.
Mm.
So actually, it's going from everything that is, on the one hand, God is trying to teach the people that there is a God with all this, signs and wonders, shock and awe, power, demonstrations of force. And then in the words of Torah, God is trying to teach about this alternative reality and about God, another God outside of Pharaoh, by saying, you have to be able to imagine something. I can't show you. You have to look at the night sky and know that a moon will appear and the
Mm.
world will start again. The world starts again right now.
Right. Right. And in the moment of utter darkness, I'm going to show you a physical astronomical symbol that out of the moment of utter darkness comes something new and light will emerge. I promise you. Watch it happen.
And there's something very powerful to me that God doesn't show Moshe a full moon in that moment. Could be a full moon, but God says, no, if you want to come with me, I'm not going to prove it to you from the beginning. There's an aspect of it, some of it's demonstrable, paint the doorposts. Some of it is not. They brought no provisions for themselves. Sometimes you just have to go.
Mhm. And that last night, in the movie, it's all of this spooky stuff. But now that last night, right? Which is, of course, the night that we recreate with our Seder, our last night in Egypt. The doorpost is decorated with the blood. We've taken the step and we can hope. And we're sitting inside and our bags are packed and our knapsacks are stuffed and our kids are excited. They don't want to go to sleep. And we hear outside the screams of Egypt, the horror screams, because there wasn't a household, says the Torah, that wasn't touched by this horror, by the death of a firstborn, which of course is the powerful image of power it's the image of power in a patriarchal society. And we're sitting here listening to the screams and wondering, like, am I safe? What's happening outside? Well, that last night, and the anticipation, the exhilaration, the fear, the worry. We're about to enter a world we have no idea about. What's that last night like?
All I can think of it as you're speaking is I'm hearing my father, who used to read a passage from Martin Buber a few years in a row. Father's a rabbi, and he read a passage from Martin Buber at the Seder. And in that, imagined retelling, the refrain is always Pharaoh saying, "I won't let you go, I won't let you go," and Moshe says, "Let my people go, let my people go. We have to worship our God." And Pharaoh says, "I won't let you go." And then after Pharaoh sees what happens, where his son, his firstborn, is killed, he looks at Moshe and just says, "Get out."
Get out. And then he says, and bless me too.
Yes.
And bless, so the crack opens up. I have an uncle who was a survivor. I talk about him a lot because he told us some wonderful stories. And one of the stories he told us when we were young, that we repeated our Seder table every year, is his story about the last night. He was taken early in the war and ended up in 6 different concentration camps. He was a carpenter, and so he was useful to them. Big, strong kid, and he ended up being one of the people that built the Auschwitz concentration camp. And
Oh,
he was a prisoner in the slave labor camp of Auschwitz. And as the Russian army was coming closer, the Germans determined that they would take all the remaining inmates and march them into Germany through the winter. 3,500 men left and only 700 arrived. And they marched them to an out camp of one of the German concentration camps in Germany. And he told us the story that he had a barracks. They put him in a wooden barracks. And when the Allies were coming, the Americans were coming this time to liberate the camp, the Nazis nailed shut the barracks. And the men in his barracks sat there thinking, this is it. We're going to get machine gunned to death because they didn't want any witnesses around. And they spent the whole night crying that they thought this was it. We survived all this to die tonight. And they heard machinery and they heard explosions and they heard, gunfire all over. And then early in the morning, as the sun was coming up, they heard heavy boots up the ramp to the door of the barracks. And that somebody smashed down the barrack door. And the men threw themselves on the ground and shouted Shema Yisrael. They thought this was it. They were going to be murdered. And there was a man, and they could only see his silhouette because the sun was behind him, standing at the door with a gun, with a rifle, speaking in Yiddish with a Oklahoma accent. Because it was an American who had sent on a reconnaissance mission to see if there were survivors of the camp. And he told them, "You're free." And they couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe it. And the guy told him in Yiddish, "You're free. You're safe. We're here. We've liberated the camp." I mean, just astonishing. And the sense of astonishment. And my uncle was not an effusive guy, and he would tell this story every year at the Seder. And every year we repeat it because it gives you that moment. You'd been a slave for generations, and tonight we're going to be free. Tomorrow morning we're leaving. We're going to run into the world. Can you imagine? Just the wonderment of it all. Just the wonderment of it all. But come back with me to that story because I want your take because you're such a great reader. In the middle of the night, Pharaoh calls to Moses and he says, get out of my
get,
country.
get out,
What's happening?
get out.
What's happening?
Hmm. Hmm. I won't be the first one to say it, but that this story, which is the most quoted story, right, of all our stories, this is the
Hmm.
story that many movements have used to talk about freedom. Ultimately, it's about the fact that there is an alternative to Pharaoh. The pharaohs of the world are they think of themselves as the only narrators, and if you deviate from their telling of the way the world is, you're punished. And so, what freedom means is that there gets to be another story.
Mm.
There has to be another story. And there has to be a God that's more powerful than that kind of Pharaoh, even when the Pharaoh exhibits all kinds of power, right? And that, I think it's Maori Naim talks about the exile of language in Egypt, in slavery, that you didn't even have words. You didn't have breath for words, let alone the ability to to argue or to present another way. And so for Pharaoh to say, get out or to leave, even though Pharaoh changes his mind, we know he chases them into the sea, right? He goes on, he lives on.
Don't give away the ending.
Um, but that moment, there's always this question of, well, why the plagues and why does God harden Pharaoh's heart for the last few plagues? And why is this such a protracted engagement? And one of the simple answers, which I think is maybe the right one, is it's for the story. It's because when your kid asks you, you need to have an engaging story to tell them and ourselves to remind us that there's more than Pharaoh in the world. So when the baddest guy of all, Pharaoh, says, get out, it's an admission of weakness.
Mm. That's wonderful. That's just wonderful. I spoke about this last week. I'm still of the school. My father taught me this idea. My father's a wonderful reader of Torah, and his idea was when a society chooses the pathway of evil, of destruction, consequences always come. And that's the purpose of the plagues. And each plague represents another element of the evil that Pharaoh imposed. Pharaoh made us build his cities. And the hail comes, it's hail with fire, go figure. The hail comes and destroys those cities. And Pharaoh promulgated death instead of life and worshiped death. And so darkness covers the land. And the beautiful image that Torah says that the darkness was so deep that a neighbor couldn't see a neighbor,
Yeah.
which is exactly what it is. You can't see the humanity of the other. And now you're cursed with that because you can't turn that off all of a sudden and become a society of solidarity anymore. And then that last plague, which is
Well, I
just,
just, but the thing that I always think about with the plagues is, and again, looking around our world, and is Pharaoh didn't care when his own people were harmed. It really wasn't even like my loyalists he really didn't care. And I will say that before certain leaders in my world, I was like, oh, this is a two-dimensional character. There's nobody like this.
hmm,
Leaders always care. Come on. This is overdrawn. Now that I look around the world and I'm older, I think, no, sometimes this is how it is.
yeah.
They don't care. And so it's up to God, to get these people who actually think they can't leave to leave. You know, and Moshe's involved, of course, but really, Pharaoh doesn't want the freedom, and the people don't think it's possible, and they're against it too. In the beginning, as soon as things go south, we don't blame Pharaoh, we blame Moses. Why are you getting us involved in this? I want to
Right.
stay.
Yeah. The ameliorist. Right. Don't make waves.
And then, as I was saying to you earlier, I think it's interesting, and I need to spend a lot more time with this. When we leave, it's not just us.
Mhm.
Some Egyptians come with us. And first of all, for the first time, I'm really thinking, we let them. Can you imagine? It's your neighbor's owner, slave master. but we all went together. So it's anyone who wants to convene around this story or around that question. What is this about? What does it mean? What does it mean to be in Egypt and to leave? Anyone who's ready to convene around that question, no matter who you're born, leaves.
Mm,
They weren't checking IDs at the sea to see who was an Israelite.
it's wonderful. So if you tell the story as the first person, you become a member of the tribe.
That's what I'm saying. And I think it's borne out. I've said this, but I think it's borne out with Yitro, who it's not clear why he decides to run into the wilderness. But one classic answer is he heard the story.
Yeah, and
He wanted to
Moses
be
tells
part of
it
the
to him.
story.
Right. Moses, he heard it and then wants to meet his son-in-law, find out if it really happened that way. Right.
And if so, I'm going to change my life. If this is possible, if there's something instead of Pharaoh, I thought Pharaoh was forever. I thought exile was forever. I thought my best possible options were some kind of escapism, like maybe I'll go to Burning Man or maybe I'll drink some wine or go shopping. That's my best option. Or maybe nihilism. Maybe I'll pretend like nothing matters and it
Mm,
doesn't matter because I'm jaded and who cares? But there's a third option. There's trying.
right.
I,
And
I
there's a
want to
and
be
there's a
part of
God who
that.
backs you. There's a God who backs your trying.
That's right.
That's the amazing thing.
I mean, actually, I was noticing this morning too when I was looking at the Parsha. You know, um, Moses doesn't just say, "Let my people go." Moses says, "Let my people go to worship their God, our God."
Right.
There's another God,
Bigger God.
the God. I think.
Right,
I think
right,
it's
right,
the
right.
the God. I mean, actually, one of my favorite stories, which I think is just the most hilarious midrash, is that when Moses and Aaron first go to Pharaoh, of course, it's Pharaoh's coronation day, and everyone's bringing him presents from all over, and he assumes that Moses and the rabbi's humor is incredible. They assume that Moses and Aaron have shown up to give a present. Where's my crown? And they say, no, 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 let my people go. We're here with a message from God. And Pharaoh is like, who is this God? I never heard of this God. Wait, let me check my records. And Pharaoh's like, he's like an officer at a bureaucratic agency. He's
He's
going
got
through the
a
God.
Rolodex. Remember what a Rolodex is? You have a
This is my
Rolodex.
file cabinet,
I'll Google him. Let me see if I can find
right?
him.
How many cities has your God conquered? Like, how tall is your God? Asking these like ridiculous questions, right? As if to say, like, Pharaoh is just so small. He can only imagine displays of power and force. And the Midrash is teaching us that's a very small way of being.
He can only imagine that the other has the same sort of evil inclination that he does.
That's right.
He can't imagine a God who cares for slaves, because who cares for slaves? What do you mean a God cares? If he's really a God, why would he be a God of slaves?
That's right.
Right? It's that narrowness that only sees every person is simply a reflection of my worst self.
And I think in this moment where there's so much mob mentality and so much division, it behooves all of us to consider in what moments am I like Pharaoh?
Mm.
In what moments am I have a file, I think it's this way, and I'm looking at the other and I'm assuming, either that forget even a nefarious motive, like I'm just assuming that I know what they're thinking. I'm assuming this is something I have experienced before.
I'm going to insist on my cognitive frame, my cognitive construction of the world, and I'm not going to change. And I would rather deny the reality that's out in front of me than change the cognitive reality that I carry with me.
And in some ways, this is Pharaoh's demise.
Yes.
He could have said, "Who's this God? I want to meet this God." Never was curious.
Hmm. It's interesting. So there's a great story later on when the people will when Moses goes to the top of the mountain to get the commandments and people worship a golden calf and Moses comes down the mountain and yells at them for it and destroys it and punishes them. And then God says to Moshe, because this people don't believe in me, no matter what I do for them, I'm leaving. I'll send an angel. The angel will take you to your promised land. I'm out of here. And Moshe says to God, if you leave, I leave. And he moves his tent outside the camp. And God goes to visit him and says, what are you doing out here? And he says, because if you're not going, I'm not going. And God says, okay, talk me into it. I'll leave. And then Moshe says to him, you'll what? Because Moshe is used to this kind of ruler who defends his cognitive frame, who defends his vision of the world, who defends his authority, his persona, and never changes. And never changes.
Right.
Right? And here's a God who, as you said a moment ago so beautifully, here's a God who says, okay, for the good of his people, even I'll change. And then Moshe says the greatest thing, he says, who the hell are you? Hareini et kvodecha. Show me who you are, because I've never encountered
That's right.
an authority figure willing to sacrifice these, the prerogatives of authority in order to do the right thing for the people that the ruler has sovereignty upon.
That's right.
Tell me why you change and how you change. And then so you get Adonai, Adonai el Rachum v'Chanun. I'm a forgiving God,
That's right.
because people need that. It's very remarkable. And Pharaoh can't change. He's stuck. He's stuck. He's stuck in his pathway. In so many ways, he's the slave.
Yes. Nicely said.
He's the slave. He can't move.
That's
Right? Right. I was a kid. Your father was too, during a time when America went off on an adventure in a place called Vietnam.
right.
And now we know Robert McNamara, who was the Secretary of Defense, is a very smart guy. In his memoir, writes that already in 1967, we knew this was a lost cause.
Mm-hmm.
But he was stuck. Lyndon Johnson was stuck. Even Richard Nixon was stuck. And they couldn't imagine a different way, and they couldn't imagine a way out of it. And they ended up kept sending young men to their deaths. Catastrophe. It's catastrophe. So where are we at the end of the Parsha? Take me spiritually and psychologically at the very last words of the Parsha.
Start me off.
Tell me where we are. Pharaoh says, go. It's so Moshe goes back to the people and he says, let's go.
Right. So,
Let's go. And now every family has a choice as well. As you said, as well as Egyptians have a choice. Right?
that's right. And of course, there's the famous Midrash. I don't know if it's in this week or next, but right as we're leaving, Moshe goes to get the bones of Yosef.
Ah, which means what? Talk to me.
Mhm.
He goes to remember, and we made a promise to Yosef that he would be buried in the cave of Machpelah. We wouldn't leave his sarcophagus in Egypt forever. But the problem is nobody
No one
knows where it
knows.
is.
No one
It's
knows where
been
he is.
400 years since the dude died, and no one
Yes.
remembers where he's buried except one.
Serach Bat Asher.
Tell me the story. I love this story.
So Serach Bat Asher shows up in several genealogies, and for a woman to show up in a genealogy, it's an unusual thing. So the rabbis create a backstory. There must be some reason that she's showing up, and it turns out that she is a woman who lived for all of the 40 generations of slavery. In fact, they place her at the very beginning in Joseph's story. They say that she's the one who tells Yaakov that Joseph is alive. You know that midrash, yeah.
Beautiful.
So, but in any case, Moses is running around looking because he can't leave without finding Joseph's bones. He made a promise, and nobody knows where she's buried. And finally, the oldest woman in town, she's been around forever. Her skin looks amazing. She's 40 generations old. And she's the one, she takes him down to the Nile. I, of course, imagine it's the exact same place where his mother once put him in.
Oh, think of that. Imagine that. Imagine Moshe's brought down and all of a sudden he recognizes,
It feels familiar.
oh my God, I know this place. Right. Oh my God.
And he says a certain amount of incantations. There's different versions of the Midrash, but he says it's time to go. you
And
know,
up from the
and it's
bottom.
it's like Harry Potter, is the coffin rises up from the bottom of the Nile, and of course the Mea Shiloach. I wrote about this. He has a great teaching where he says, actually Moshe's the leader. Everyone is in a tumult. They're leaving Egypt. God is taking them out a circuitous route. It's a chaotic moment. Moshe should really be there. He's the only one who knows what's happening what is he doing? Why is he abdicating his authority? And Meir Shiloach suggests that sometimes when things are very chaotic and we don't know exactly what God's plan is, then we just fulfill a mitzvah. We
Mm.
just fulfill a command. We don't even, it doesn't seem like it has a direct connection. Why am I, why am I going to Shabbat now? Why am I saying Kiddush now? Why do I have to go to Passover now? Because sometimes it locates us in our lives and in the life project.
Mm.
And so Moshe, right before he's about to leave with a bunch of people he doesn't really know on a journey where he doesn't basically know where he's going to a fabled land he may never reach, he just goes to connect himself to this larger chain. And he goes to get his ancestor that he never met to fulfill a promise he never heard.
Mm. That's beautiful. And come back with me to Serach. I love her. Serach, the daughter of Asher. Asher, one of the sons of Jacob, and Serach is his daughter. And she survives the whole Holocaust of the experience.
They say she makes it into paradise alive in one of the versions. Yeah. But
And
she
so
tells him she's the one who has the key.
she has the legacy. You see, everyone is looking forward. I'm getting out of here. We're going to go to the promised land. Tomorrow is going to be so glorious. And the old one, the old one says, listen,
Not so fast.
let me tell you where you're from and who you are. Let me tell you what we know. Let me tell you of the world we know, because we know from whence we came, and you need to hear this story so that you don't make the same mistakes that we made, so you don't take the wrong turns and the dead ends, so that you don't forget. We are the ones who preserved memory of family, community, and legacy. The old ones have this incredible value,
That's
right?
right.
And she
No,
carries them. I mean, this image of this old woman taking the great leader Moshe Rabbeinu by the hand down to the river from whence he was drawn. And she says, new young boy, he's 80, of course, you recognize this place? And he begins, to, of course, to weep because he remembers his mother and he remembers Bat Paro and he remembers his sister Miriam. Maybe she comes with him, just, and
it's
she
mind
says,
blowing just in this moment of like great fracturing and wreckage and separation, right? Like just an absolute change, right? Like it's abrupt. That's the moment of continuity.
it's beautiful.
That's
And
the moment where Torah insists on continuity. And not only do you have to go fulfill this promise, you got to carry Yosef on your back, all for the 40 years. They carry the ark and they carry Yosef,
mm,
right? Can you imagine? Like, I think that there may be not a better like metaphor for being a Jew than like literally carrying your ancestor on your back.
back to the promised land.
That's it.
You're carrying your past, but forward. I
That's
mean,
right.
how many times I remember I did this when I was a young rabbi. Maybe I shouldn't have done this, but there was a bar mitzvah kid, lovely, lovely kid. I mean, a kid I really love. I should confess that there's some kids, but I love this kid. And I'm sitting there on the bima watching him read his Haftorah, and his grandparents are survivors.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm watching them weeping.
Yeah.
And it was time to give him his charge, his blessing. And I
Mhm.
said, you understand the courage and risks that they took and the courage they showed and the faith they had to have for you to be here and to be, and do you realize that all of that is in your hands now because the choices you will make in your life going forward will either justify and sanctify their courage and the risks they took, or we'll desecrate them. And I realized right away that's a hell of a burden to put on a kid's shoulders. But
Mazel tov.
yeah, but this kid got it. And he said, I promise. I promise. So Sarach takes Moshe there and he says, look, she says to him, you've got to remember that what you're doing fulfills his life. His life isn't over yet. His story isn't over yet, not until you take them to the promised land. So, young man, do your job and do it well, right? Because you carry him on your shoulders now.
That's right. And taking it to the commandment and the mitzvah, they say, because Moses helps with the burial of Joseph, right? That we know that when we bury people, we're not repaid. That's
Chesed shalem is right.
right. They can't repay us. But because Moshe does that, God will bury Moshe.
Yeah,
Right?
with a
Like
kiss.
if you enter into this larger system, we're talking about it from different angles, from system of Jewish time, entering the story, entering the history, entering the multi-generational project, entering the system of doing mitzvot, even maybe when it doesn't make sense, you can't make sense of it. God would take care of you.
Wonderful. Oh, Noah, it's a joy to study Torah with you. So
Such
let
a
me give you
pleasure.
I want to give you a kudo and a commercial. So, ladies and gentlemen, my dear friends, if you're in LA, come learn with me.
Mm,
But if you find yourself in San Francisco on a Shabbos morning,
mm,
this community has an unusual name. It's called The Kitchen. And you can Google it. It's thekitchensf.org and find out when they have Shabbos. Because, first of all, you get this Torah, which is extraordinary. And then you get I made a little gift to this congregation some
mm,
years ago. There was
mm.
this young man whose music was genius, and he's now their musical leader. And he
He's our chazan. He's unbelievable.
Sephardic music, like ethereal, like God dances to this music. So if you're ever there, I'm going to be there in a couple of weeks because I have to have it once a year to recharge my neshama. So if you please find your way to this community. Um, Not only is the hospitality warm and loving, is the learning spectacular and the music beyond belief.
Mm.
They even serve a good kiddush. And
We try, and we have the
it's
best
marvelous.
teachers. We have the best teachers. Thank
So I
you. We
wish
would
you good
welcome
Shabbos.
anyone. Please come.
A good Shabbos to everyone and stay well. Take
Shabbat
care.
shalom,
Shabbat
v'rach.
shalom.